What is up, fanatics, fan guy addicts? Welcome to this edition of the Ultimate Fan Guy. This is going to be our Tuesday recap edition. Starting on Tuesday, starting this week, we're going to go ahead and recap what we got wrong, what we got right from this week in fantasy sports. So you can expect a recap on Tuesdays. It'll kind of give you progress as to how we're doing. Personally, I played 14 Draftkings lineups this week. They were all unique lineups. I didn't repeat any of them, and I cashed in 9 contests, including a couple of top 100 finishes. So we had an okay day. We didn't get any big scores, but a 60% catch rate is really high with regards to fantasy sports. So all in all, it was a pretty good week. And if you followed my advice, you probably had a fairly good week. Where we went wrong, we're going to start with quarterbacks. Obviously, we went wrong with Aaron Rodgers. Now, I didn't predict him to have a bad game, per se. Matter of fact, I think when I was talking about him, he was kind of a middling matchup for me. Like, I was kind of okay if you played him, okay if you didn't. But he turned it up and put up 58 points. The relevance here is that maybe, we're going to see an emergence of Aaron Rodgers. I'm not sold on it yet. Obviously, he's an immensely talented quarterback. But based on what we've seen this year as a whole, I'm not sure he's going to repeat this, but it is worth monitoring and something to keep an eye on for daily fantasy if he turns into the Aaron Rodgers of old. So I must admit, this week I wasn't I wasn't hyping him up a lot, and so we didn't nail the #1 quarterback of the week. I was high on Kirk Cousins, as you remember from the video. I did say that he was going to have a good week this week, and he did. He was #2 quarterback on the week. Stafford was actually another play that I liked this week, so we were right about that. Brissett and Goff were 2 of my top 3 plays this week, and they both finished top 5. Goff was my #1, Brissett was my #3. So obviously, in terms of quarterbacks, we really called it well. Josh Allen was also on my Facebook list in my top 6 list, and he's a top 6 quarterback for the week. The quarterbacks we got wrong that we liked were Lamar Jackson and Matt Ryan. Now, the Matt Ryan injury, he got hurt. He was playing bad. So, Matt Ryan was a quarterback that was in my top 5 this week as well. And he let us down. So, definitely, we fell a little flat on the Matt Ryan. Lamar Jackson didn't quite have as good a game as I thought he was going to have either. So, we kind of fell a little flat there, too. But overall, our quarterback picks this past week, especially for their how much they cost. Goff, Allen, and Brissett and Cousins, 4 of the top 6 quarterbacks. So this week we did really well with our quarterback picks as a whole. I'm actually really pleased with the quarterback selections I made this week. And if you played anyone but Matt Ryan that I suggested, you had a chance to do well in DraftKings. You weren't winning because we didn't pick Aaron Rodgers, but if you picked any of the other quarterbacks I listed, you probably gave yourself a shot, at least a good shot at cashing. Moving on to running backs. So Chase Edmonds was a top running back this week. He was on my list as if David Johnson doesn't play, Chase Edmonds is a must start. The problem is they told us David Johnson was playing. I played David Johnson in all 3 of my main fantasy leagues, like real life fantasy, non-daily fantasy stuff. And, it was a disaster. I won all 3 of my games because I'm the fucking man. But in one of those, I started Matt Ryan and Kerryon Johnson along with David Johnson. But my opponent's team totally shit the bed. Anyway, I'm getting off track. So Chase Edmonds was a great play. We kind of hinted that if David Johnson wouldn't play, he was a must play. But because David Johnson was supposed to play, it got a little convoluted. Needless to say, this is a situation worth monitoring forward. I don't think Chase Edmonds is going to take the job from David Johnson when Johnson is healthy, but we just don't know Johnson's status. So if you have Johnson, make sure you get Edmonds if you can. Though he's owned now in 48% of Yahoo leagues. I have him in all of my leagues because I have David Johnson in all of my leagues. Worth monitoring. I'm really happy about my running back picks this week too, in some ways, because Latavius Murray was my value pick of the week. And sure enough, he finished as the number 2 running back of the week. So for all the people who were giving me shit for saying Latavius Murray was going to go off against the Bears, y'all can eat a big old dick, because Latavius Murray fucking wrecked. And we knew he was gonna. I told you he was gonna. I had him on hella lineups, which is probably why I had a 60% plus cash rate this week. The Bears defense is not what it was. It's not. And people got to get out of that frame of mind. They're a good defense, but they're very exploitable to running backs. And with Kamara out last week, Latavius Murray was a slam dunk play. And if you listen to me, you did good. So, ta-da. Now, Dalvin Cook, I actually said was going to have a brilliant game, but he was very, very expensive. For instance, Dalvin Cook was $8,000. Latavius Murray was $5,000. That is a massive difference, and you got just as many points. You got more from Latavius Murray. Same with Zeke. Of course they priced Zeke and Cook high. They were both $8,000. Zeke was going to have a good game, and I said that. I just didn't like his price, and, I stand behind that. Eckler was kind of the surprise of the week for me. I was actually thinking that this was going to be a week that Melvin Gordon was going to get on track. But Eckler just seems to be catching passes, man. 118 receiving yards. So while I don't like his rest of year outlook, he definitely was where we fell flat this week. Sony Michel, I didn't really talk about him much on my show, but I can show you my Draftkings showdown lineups from last night, where Sony Michel was the captain of every one of my teams. So, it was pretty obvious that the Patriots were going to get out to a lead and run the ball. So I'm going to take half credit on Michel, because I really liked him. I liked him more this week than I do really ever, because I just don't like to play Patriots. There's too many variables there. But I did like Sony Michel this week. Aaron Jones had a surprising week, despite never really knowing what his volume is going to be like. We didn't really comment on him, so, I'll take the hit there. I didn't really hype up Aaron Jones. I did like Derrick Henry. I had him on a lot of DraftKings lineups. I wish he was a little bit more involved in the passing game, but he was good. Barkley, the most expensive running back, finished, around the top 10. But for $9,000, when you can get a guy like Murray for $5,000, it's just better. And then right after that were the two of my top 3 running backs, which were Fournette and Jacobs. Fournette, Jacobs, and Latavius Murray were my top 3 running backs of the week. Fournette put up 16.5. Jacobs put up 16.4. Jacobs was only 5,000 too. He was in the Latavius Murray category. So if you played Josh Jacobs and you listened to my advice on that, you probably did good. I had Josh Jacobs, I think, on 8 of my 14 lineups. And I had Fournette on about the same. Fournette was a lot more expensive. I actually thought he was going to have a better day than he did against Cincy. But he didn't hit. He got 16.5, and he didn't hit pay dirt. He did not get a touchdown. Fournette put up 131 rushing yards, a couple catches for 14 passing yards. He had basically $150 in yardage. So I'm going to say that was a great call too. He could have easily had a couple touchdowns that would have propelled him to top 5 status for the week. In terms of big misses for the week, I'm kind of looking. As you can see on my Facebook post, I propped Fournette, Derrick Henry, Latavius Murray, Josh Jacobs, Chase Edmonds. I mean, literally what I just said is what I put on my quick hit Facebook post. The only guy I was wrong about was Mr. Singletary for the Bills. He didn't really get too much playing time. The Bills ran the fewest offensive plays they've run all year. So Singletary I missed on. However, I was a slam dunk on every other one of my running backs that I picked this week. So listen to your fan guy. So now we're going to go on to wide receivers. Wide receivers. So I was seeing if I had him on here. I didn't, but I had Marvin Jones on 9 of my 14 lineups as well. So I was obviously high on Marvin Jones. I think I talked positively about him in my video. He didn't make my top 5 list, but I had him on more lineups than just about anybody. So I was clearly pretty high on him, knowing that Xavier Rhodes was going to be shadowing Galladay and figuring that Detroit was going to have a hard time running the ball. I did not predict Kerryon Johnson's injury, but I also didn't think Kerryon Johnson was going to have a good week anyway. And this probably led to Marvin Jones's volume for the week. That being said, I don't really care what led to it. I care that I hyped him up, and had you listened to me, You played Marvin Jones, and you would have had a killer day. Second receiver this week was Zach Pascal. Now, this is a surprise because my top receiver for the week, who also finished top 10, you'll see in a second, was T.Y. Hilton, who always torches the Texans. But, it was Zach Pascal who stole the show with 2 touchdowns and 106 receiving yards. He actually did get out targeted by T.Y. Hilton by quite a bit, but Zach Pascal was very efficient with his targets, 7 targets, 6 receptions. I did not hype up Zach Pascal. However, I did hype up Jacoby Brissett. He was going to have to throw to someone. Little did we know he was going to have 2 top 10 receivers this week. DeAndre Hopkins, I was huge on this week. I only had him in 4 or 5 of my lineups because he was very expensive, but it was about time he had a bounce back game. We knew it was going to happen. And this was the week. It was a good week for it to happen. So in quite a few of my lineups, I actually had T.Y. Hilton and DeAndre Hopkins, figuring that was going to be kind of a duel in that game. Allen Robinson. I was mixed on Allen Robinson this week on my video because Lattimore can go both ways. Like sometimes he's super shut down, sometimes he gets torched. He typically plays to the level of his competition. I don't think Allen Robinson fits into the elite level. He's a good receiver. He might even be a great receiver, but he's not Julio. He's not T.Y. Hilton. He's not those guys that are just. He's not the DeAndre Hopkins or he just he's a good receiver, and I liked Robinson this week just because I thought Trubisky was going to go to him a ton. Sure enough, 16 targets on the day. He did get go to him a ton, so it was a good call. Michael Thomas, he's been steady Eddie. I didn't really hype him up. He was very expensive. I did play him in a lot of my afternoon only lineups, but it was a solid day for Thomas. Corey Davis, I actually had on 5 or 6 of my lineups. So because I saw the connection him and Tannehill were having at the end of last week's game, looks like Corey Davis might return to fantasy relevance now that Tannehill's behind center there. It looks like he's a little bit better quarterback than Mariota, and he's certainly going to look to Corey Davis's way a little more. And our 10th receiver was T.Y. Hilton, who I did have as my number 1. He finished as wide receiver 10. But, I think that's fair. I mean, I basically, I called 4 of the top 10 receivers in my top 5. So that's pretty good. Not to mention John Brown was in my top 10. He finished 11th. So all in all, I think we did really good on receivers this week. Where we missed with Larry Fitzgerald, who I'm almost scared to see where he finished. We really thought Fitz was going to have a good game against the Giants, and especially with David Johnson not playing, I would have sworn he did. However, it looks like he had just a garbage day. Look at that. 3 targets, man. Oof. So we bricked on Fitzgerald. I still stand behind that prediction, though. They were playing against the absolutely terrible defense in Arizona. So, I don't really feel that bad for hyping up Fitzgerald. Golden Tate, we liked, and he actually finished top 20, so I feel pretty good about that. Brandon Cooks. I also like John Brown, as I said. He's on my list. He finished 11th. Brandon Cooks was a guy who kind of let me down this week. He finished top 30, it looks like, top 40. He only put up a 10 spot. He got 7 targets, though, which is actually high for him. So, I think if LA was in a more competitive game against Atlanta, like if Matt Ryan hadn't gotten hurt and they were able to score, I think Cooks would have had a bigger day. So I stand behind that pick, even though it didn't work out perfectly. But, needless to say, it was technically wrong. And my flop of the week in terms of receivers was Tyler Boyd. But I'd like to point out Tyler Boyd got 14 targets. So he caught 5 of them for 55, and he lost a fumble. 14 targets. No one on this page has 14 targets. Matter of fact, the only guy who got more targets than him in the whole freaking league was Allen Robinson this week. So while Tyler Boyd was a miss, was it really? I mean, if he had caught more than 5 of those 14 passes thrown his way, excuse me, he'd have had a freaking awesome day. So while we missed on Tyler Boyd, I'm always happy to see the volume when we call for that, because in fantasy that's what we chase. We chase volume. We're not Nostradamus. We don't know what's going to happen. But if I pick a guy in my top 5 or 6 receivers who gets 14 targets that week, I feel good about it, even if it didn't turn out well. I did have Boyd on probably 5 or 6 of my lineups as well, which wasn't great, but we made up for it with some of the Marvin Joneses and Latavius Murray's. Next, we're going to go to running. Oh, we already did running backs. Tight ends. Okay, this is where my biggest flop of the week is, and I'm just going to lead. This one's on me. This is where we went really wrong this week. I thought Evan Ingram was going to have a huge day. He was the most expensive tight end, I believe, and I still had him all over my lineups because he was playing against Arizona. Arizona cannot stop tight ends. And when I mean, like all year, they're the worst team against tight ends. And you figure you got a guy like Evan Ingram who, oh my God, 1.6 points. He got 5 targets. He caught 1. You got a guy who's like arguably the best tight end in the league this year. He's playing against the worst tight end defense. For me, this was like my slam dunk of the week. I had Evan Ingram on 12 of my 14 lineups. He flopped, and I still cashed in 9 of them, if that tells you how good we did other than tight end. Had I switched him to Darren Waller or something, we might have hit big pay dirt this week in terms of actual money. So, Evan Ingram, not going to lie, my absolute flop of the week. He was my favorite matchup, and it didn't work. Other tight ends I liked were Hooper, who, he finished top 8. He got a touchdown pretty late without Matt Ryan even in the game. 14.5. That's good enough from a tight end. I also like Gerald Everett, who finished 6. He got 10 targets, which is huge for a tight end. He led the tight ends. He even got more targets than Darren Waller this week. So, as you can see, I was big on Gerald Everett. I liked Hooper, Andrews. Andrews didn't have a great day. Yeah, only 5.9, but he got 8 targets. Again, we chase volume. 8 targets was the same as the any tight end other than Gerald Everett. So Andrews didn't work out, but it was a fine pick. Hunter Henry, who finished top 5. So, we were pretty good on tight ends this week. It was a weird week for tight ends. Darren Waller's always a stud. He's a huge target in that lineup. I didn't have him on a lot of my lineups this week because I was a real big believer in Josh Jacobs this week. So it's tough to go Waller and Jacobs, but as it turns out, they would have paired very nicely together. Waller does Waller things, and it definitely, boosts his value in my mind, at least for the rest of the season. But anytime you got Eric Ebron and Kyle Rudolph as number 2 and 3 tight ends for the week, it's a strange week. Just flat out. It's just Dallas Goedert was in the top 7. He scored 3 times as many as Zach Ertz. Very strange week for tight ends. So all in all, I think my tight ends, other than Evan Ingram, we called pretty well. Defense, I knocked out of the park this week. My favorite defenses were, I thought they did better, were New Orleans, Chicago, who they were both doing really good until the end of that game. So I guess not as good as I thought. New England's always a rock steady play. I did like the Bills, Saints, 49ers, Bears. San Francisco had a huge day. And Buffalo was also top 10. So and New England played on a weird night, so they weren't even in there but last night. But New England's always a rock steady play. Definitely didn't know Kansas City was going to do that well. Los Angeles is always a pretty good play. The Ravens stepped up this week. I won't say we knocked defenses out of the park this week, but, it was a fair to middling week for that. So needless to say, that's our recap. All in all, I think if you follow the advice, generally speaking, you could have put together a very, very successful lineup just based on mixing and matching the players I named. If you did that, you probably did cash, especially if you faded Evan Ingram. You probably did cash this week. So I'm proud of ours. I'm proud of us. I'm proud of me. We're going to keep this train rolling, hopefully. There was a lot of matchups I liked this week. I said there was a lot of matchups I liked this week, and sure enough, there was a lot of matchups that worked out. So thanks for coming into the Ultimate Fan Guy's first recap edition. I hope I did you well this week. If I didn't, I'm sorry. Stick with me. I promise you we will win over the long run. We're crushing it this season so far. So it's only a matter of time before we get the big one. But thanks for stopping by the Ultimate Fan Guy. I really appreciate it. Much love. If you like what you see or hear, please drop a note in the comments. If you think I'm a moron, drop a note in the comments. It's all gravy, baby. So much love. Thanks for coming out. Until tomorrow, we'll do something a little different, non-football related. We'll get back to a pop culture review or top 10 list. But come back on by, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you soon.